Hello, welcome to Montana's Peer Network, another Recovery Talks podcast. Today we're talking about Healthy Minds, Healthy Bodies workbook. Anybody who's familiar with MPN should be very familiar with this book. We have had this book going all the way back to, I think it was 2013. I think that's when we first published it. And I will tell you something really interesting. A lot of people don't know is that we used to hand publish these on our own. We used to spiral bind the whole thing. Do you remember that? So we would sit there in the office with the machine and it would punch the holes, and then you put the spiral and you have to work this handle and you have to get it just right because it has to go through all those little holes. Anyway, we finally smartened up. We take it to a printer now and get it printed. But those were the days when MPN was just like starting out and we were just like, hey, we're going to do this ourselves. We were so proud of this book. And so I'm here with Andy and Mandy, and we're going to talk about Healthy Minds, Healthy Bodies, how you might use it, and why this book is so important.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a book that's worth being proud of. I can think back to my early days as a peer support specialist, and I use this all the time in my groups. There's so many different activities in here. You can score yourself. It gives so much education and information. It really breaks things down for people, which people in early recovery particularly kind of need that broken down. And it just really was like this perfect all in one place roadmap to get people going, to be able to see where they actually wanted to improve their recovery and their quality of life. And this gave me all the tools I needed to run that group. And it was wonderful.
So it sounds like you primarily used part 2 of the book because it's split into two different sections. You used part 2, and that's based on the 8 dimensions of wellness and using the 8 dimensions to score yourself and look at all the areas.
SMART goals, it teaches you how to set SMART goals, which is important.
Yeah. I remember in this image here, you can see these little brains. We ordered these little squeezy, is that the word? Squishy little brains, these little they weren't stress balls,
things,
stress brains. Yeah. And put the little name on it. I still have a couple of those left. Those go all the way back to before we even had made the book. This was a live presentation we used to take around Montana, and we used to hand out all of these worksheets on the 8 dimensions and sleep and these different elements of recovery. And then it occurred to us, wow, we're printing like hundreds of pages and we're handing this out. Why couldn't we just put it into a book? Right. Now, Andy, you wanted to talk about part 1 in the book.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So when I took PS 101 2017, I was just getting introduced to the concept of recovery in mental health. I was hired to be a peer supporter focused on mental health. The organization also hired somebody to focus on substance use. And so PS 101 was really my first introduction to the concept of recovery in mental health, because recovery was always a substance use thing for me, right? Like, and I think that's common. I think
it is.
When most people think about recovery, they think about substance use, not mental health. And so it really, this book and PS 101 really helped me understand that concept, and that I was in recovery. And then thinking back, okay, so when did that start? Because I think it's harder for people who don't have substance use issues to like pinpoint this is when my recovery started, right?
Sure.
Because you don't have, well, I stopped using, this substance. So that's when my recovery started. And so
Yeah.
it really made me like think about, when I got diagnosed and all of those kinds of things. And at that time, I realized that I had probably been in stable recovery for about 8 years, which doesn't seem like very long from like first diagnosis, right? But
Mhm,
things
mhm.
had all been so up and down and, those kinds of
Right.
things that,
Right.
I pinpointed that time period, I guess. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
just the whole concept and the like the pathways to
Mhm.
recovery for mental health.
Yeah. There's a big emphasis. In fact, it's page 5. So it's right in the beginning of the book, page 5. We talk about what is mental health, understanding mental health myths and facts. That was a very important component when we were designing this and the whole idea around recovery, because that's what NPN is about. We're about recovery from blank. You fill in the blank. We're not dictating to you what that looks like, or how to define it. And so the first part does deal a lot with mental health. And I know my section in here, my personal story, I chose to focus on co-occurring, because that's what I would talk about when I would go do these presentations, was being diagnosed with co-occurring. And then I can remember this conversation, not only with my therapist or family, but also with myself, of, well, are you depressed because you're drinking, or are you drinking because you're depressed? And you sort of get stuck in that, going round and round and round, until, through many therapy sessions, you begin to realize it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't really matter. You have to start to look at your whole health wellness, and what is that going to be moving forward. And so that's what I wrote about in mine. But yeah, the first section, it's all about that, and trauma. There's a lot of information about trauma in the first section. Did you use some of that, Mandy, when you were doing groups? Did you guys get into trauma?
I did, yep. And we went over ACEs stuff. We did some ACEs
Mm-hmm.
work. I used that a lot. Yep. When we went over trauma, we did a lot with trauma in my groups, but
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
would kind of start in those areas. And then it's like, now we can go into this, into part 2, into this back section, and
Mm-hmm.
let's see where I can actually help you guys move forward.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, the goal setting, once you start introducing goal setting to people, and the idea that I can actually work towards things, big and small things in different areas. And I always have loved, the freedom, right? The freedom of, there's 8 dimensions. So what do I want to work on?
Yes.
Right? And those are the kinds of things you can do with this book, and that's the way it's designed. And we use that like scoring system, like just some sort of like measurement, like how do you measure how well I am here versus there, and allowing people to do that, because I think that's empowering. Then you give the power back to the individual to say, okay, this is what I want to work on. Maybe my doctor wants me to work on this other thing over here, my physical wellness, but I really want to work on my emotional wellness or my spiritual wellness or whatever.
Giving people the rate yourself kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I think makes things less squishy. I use that word all the time, right? Like
Yeah.
it solidifies things or makes them
Yeah.
I don't know, like it makes the concepts easier to process if you can,
Mm-hmm.
add some numbers onto the things or
Mm-hmm.
something like that, right? If I just think about, well, what does emotional wellness mean?
Mm-hmm.
Where am I with that? It's really helpful
Mm-hmm.
for me at least to have those, well, rate these things so you can really see where things are.
Right.
I
Right.
agree.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think like, and I just picked one here, intellectual wellness. There's the space, and then you can see the SMART goals. It's set up and it walks through what are SMART goals. How do you build and develop SMART goals? And then when we incorporated this in 2017 into PS 101, Peer Support 101 training for certification, then this is what Mandy's talking about, is now you put this tool into people's hands and they get exposed to it, right? So that when they go and they're working in a center or, clinic, then they already are familiar with the book, they're familiar with the concepts, they've learned them in training. Now you can go right in and start working with folks and the book. And I would really encourage you, if you're watching this sounds interesting, you can order these off of our website. And I will tell you, we sell a lot of them throughout the year. If you go to Peer Support 101, you get a copy, you get your own copy. But yeah, I think that that was one of the things, when you start a project like this, and I can remember the origins of it and how it kind of got going, right? I started off talking about how we used to make them, but way before that, it was the board of directors and myself, and we were sitting in this meeting room. We were in a hotel in Helena, and we were crafting what would become this, except we didn't know about this. We just said, how do we help people with whole health, wellness, and recovery? And it was presentations and handouts and folders and all this. And I literally can remember the moment when one of our board members said, we should call it Healthy Minds, Healthy Bodies. That moment just for some reason, like really stands out to me. And we wrote it, we had the, easel pads, like we like to use. And, we wrote it out, Healthy Minds, Healthy Bodies, okay, yeah. A peer approach, then someone else said a peer approach, and that became the name. And then the colors, we were already using blue and white were our colors. And then I can't remember how the orange became part of it exactly, but I remember that meeting and that conversation. And I often think back, you have those moments, and who knew 10 years later we would have, we're up to the 4th edition. And I don't know, Andy, if you want to talk about, the changes we made in the 4th edition versus the 3rd one.
Yeah, because the first one I had was the 3rd edition, right, in 2017. And then so I got to work on the 4th edition quite a bit. So my story got added to that, and my story is about early warning signs. Because when I looked back, I had mental health issues from like birth. Yeah, there's mine. And so again, that gave me an opportunity to explore that in order to write that thing. But I really liked putting together the 4th edition and adding things like the QR codes so that people can just scan that and see where our references came from, or worksheets or things like that. Yeah, it makes it so much easier than trying to type in a great big long URL to get to this stuff, right? Like,
which is what we had.
I know, and so I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to type.
Had.
Yeah, I'm not going to type that whole thing, right? So I'm probably not going to look at that reference because I don't want to type that whole thing in there. So adding the QR codes, I think is really helpful to people. I like updating things. I mean, the core concepts, of course, are going to be the same from edition to edition. And, those goal setting things and stuff like that are the same, but we get to add new stories from members and from staff, and and just we get to add a few new things. And even if you have an old edition and you've gone through it and you've filled out the worksheet pages, when you get a new one, you're going to get those same worksheet pages, but it's a good way to go back and say, look at the progress I've made. Or I've done emotional wellness, now I need to focus on financial wellness or something, right? It gives you a chance to go back through and explore those things and see the progress. that is immensely helpful for me, because sometimes you can get
Yeah.
bogged down in that I'm not going anywhere, everything's the
Right.
same, the same, the same.
Right.
But when you have a chance to look back, it's helpful to see that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Healthy Minds, Healthy Bodies, A Pure Approach Workbook, 4th edition, available on our website. We'll put the link below. You can click on that and get yourself a copy. Get someone who, a friend or a loved one who's in recovery. Maybe you get them a copy and give that as a gift to somebody. That'd be a wonderful gift to be
Yeah.
given, for sure. Well, thanks. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me about Healthy Minds, Healthy Bodies.
Thanks for making a book that's made such a huge impact on the recovery community.
Yeah, well, it was a lot of people worked on this over the years, so it's a good thing.